Good morning. We begin this morning with general questions. Our first question is from David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to reach marginalised groups affected by HIV.
Mr Joe Fitzpatrick.
Prevention of HIV transmission remains a priority for the Scottish Government, and there is absolutely no room for complacency. An estimated 91% of HIV-positive people in Scotland know their status. 98% of this 91% are receiving treatment. 97% of those on treatment are achieving viral suppression. So while we have achieved the UNAIDS 90-90-90 targets, there remains a clear priority to increase the number of people who know their status and then can go on to get that treatment and move towards virus suppression.
David Torrance.
For that answer. Kirkcaldy lost a popular member of its Pride community to AIDS earlier this month. Ross Scott tragically passed away at the age of just 25, having lived with HIV virus for 2 years without knowing. Usually antiretroviral drugs allow people with HIV to live long lives, but unfortunately Ross' diagnosis was too late for treatment to be effective. Does the Minister agree with me that we all have a role to play in increasing awareness of HIV and the importance of prompt testing and treatment?
Minister.
I do agree. It is absolutely crucial that we remain vigilant in this area and that we work collaboratively in order to keep making the progress. A clear priority, as I said, is to increase the number of people who know their status so they can go on to get that treatment. That's why the Scottish Government has set up a short-life working group to consider options for improving HIV testing, and we continue to work closely with NHS boards and third sector organisations to raise awareness and to eradicate the stigma around the virus and tackle the false myths and prejudice that still surround it. I think stigma remains one of the biggest barriers to people getting that HIV test, which will ultimately save lives.
And Neil Findlay.
The HIV outbreak among the homeless community was exacerbated by previous cuts to drug and alcohol budgets. Will the Minister confirm that he has made representations to the Finance Secretary in the run-up to the budget to ensure that we put the right money and resources behind dealing with Scotland's drugs crisis?
Minister. The HIV outbreak in Glasgow is obviously of huge concern. The member is correct that largely that is between a community which crosses the boundaries in terms of a group of the most vulnerable, homeless and people who use various inject substances. Is absolutely crucial that we take actions to support Glasgow and the Health Board there to respond to the outbreak. There's been a number of meetings with services in that area, bringing services together. One of the really useful projects which is doing work along with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde is Waverley Care, who have a number of projects engaging directly with the most vulnerable populations. Within that scheme, we currently provide third sector funding of £2.13 million for projects to support people with bloodborne viruses.
Thank you. Question number 2, Sarah Boyack.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it has fully costed the policy commitments it has made that are to be delivered through local government.
Cabinet Secretary.
All new policy commitments that have financial costs for local government are indeed costed and discussed with local government, which includes an agreed approach on distribution matters.
And I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. I met with local government colleagues this week, and a key concern they raised was the issue of adequate funding for the rollout of additional childcare. They were not against the Scottish Government's principle, but they were very worried about the challenges of rolling out the policy across different challenges in Scotland. Is the Minister aware of these concerns, and will he act on them?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'll continue to have discussions with COSLA about the budget and other matters. I'll also have discussions with opposition political parties about the budgets. Those discussions have begun. I look forward to those discussions ongoing in a very constructive fashion. The policy in early learning and childcare is fully funded. That funding agreement was reached with local government, where we also covered distribution matters as well. If there are any further concerns, I'm happy to engage with COSLA to progress those talks.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given it's so interested in full costings, can the Minister advise as to whether the Labour Group has provided details of how it will cost its own proposals for local government, or said how these will be funded either by tax rises or switching funds from other budget portfolios, or by demanding additional powers for local government, which, like workplace parking, they will then no doubt vote against?
Cabinet Secretary.
I know there was a debate yesterday. I will set out an SNP budget to the Scottish Parliament. It will be for other parties to engage with me constructively, but no, I haven't had any detailed alternative costings, and I look forward to such costings coming forward if opposition parties disagree with the proposition that I present to Parliament.
Murdo Fraser.
Presiding Officer, given that the Fraser of Allen Institute have said that the Westminster Block grant to Scotland will increase by 2% in real terms in the coming year, would the Finance Secretary agree that there is no justification, therefore, for any further cuts to local council funding?
Cabinet Secretary.
It has been the Conservative government, of course, that's cut our budget and in real terms, so I think that's a very interesting proposition from Murdo Fraser. I would also point out that we are abiding by our commitment around real terms, passing on the Barnett consequentials to health as well. And of course, we haven't cut local government's budgets. Over the time I've been Finance Secretary, local government has enjoyed real terms increases in their resources, despite the position of the Conservatives, which was to call for tax cuts for the richest of society and oppose those budgets that gave more resources to local government.
Question number 3, James Dornan.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the implementation of the Abusive Behaviour and Sexual Harm Scotland Act 2016.
Cabinet Secretary Hamza Youssef.
All the provisions in the Act have been implemented, except the parts that provide for the creation of sexual harm prevention orders and sexual risk orders. Until the UK Government amends the necessary reserved primary legislation, these orders will not be enforceable across the rest of the UK. It would therefore be inappropriate and irresponsible to enact upon them. My predecessor and I have raised this with UK ministers on a number of occasions. To date, the UK Government have not identified a suitable legislative vehicle to make these changes. We will commence these orders as soon as the UK Government passes the appropriate legislation. Until that time, the existing preventative orders for sexual offending in Scotland and the multi-agency public protection arrangements provide the most robust and enforceable regime for keeping the public safe.
James Dornan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Citizens Advice Scotland has reported a 50% increase in traffic to their web pages, which offer advice for people who have been affected by the sharing of intimate images or videos without their consent. And that disappointing news that you've just told us there, can you tell us, without the UK Government enforcing this, making these changes, what impact is this delay going to have on those victims?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thought those figures quoted by James Dornan are very stark. And look, the UK Government have indicated that they do see they understand the intent behind what we're trying to do. They think that there's certainly some wisdom in doing what we're doing, but they have not made any commitments around when they'll bring forward the changes to the reserved legislation, despite, as I say, both me and my predecessor asking for that. There's no timescale in place. As I say, there are orders at the moment that we can use that will, of course, keep people safe, but we want a stronger regime, and we believe that can be done with the orders that would require UK Government legislative change. So in the meantime, we'll continue to press the UK Government to pass the necessary primary legislation as soon as possible.
Thank you. Question number 4, Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to allow NHS Dumfries and Galloway to change existing cancer pathways by aligning with the West of Scotland cancer network rather than the South East Scotland network in order to reduce journey times for treatment for cancer patients in Wigtonshire.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
The Scottish Government is aware that Dumfries and Galloway has publicly stated its intention to seek alignment with the West of Scotland Cancer Network at some point in the future. While no formal planning discussions on any realignment have taken place, my officials have been engaging with NHS Dumfries and Galloway on this matter. Such a significant change would require considerable discussion and planning with other neighbouring boards, and any service change would have to undergo consultation to provide safety and quality assurances and ensure that patients' waiting times were not negatively impacted.
Colin Smith.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Does he accept, though, it will take direct action from the Government either to increase capacity at the Glasgow Cancer Centre or to enable another health board effectively to swap with Dumfries and Galloway in order to allow them to realign with the West of Scotland? And given the time it would take for that to happen, does she support an interim measure of allowing patients in the west of the region in Wigtonshire to realign earlier, or to promote the fact that actually they already have a freedom of choice to choose to go to Glasgow instead of that long journey to Edinburgh?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, grateful to Mr Smythe for his question. Of course, partly what he touches on at the start of that supplementary question is why it does take some time in terms of planning and discussions between Dumfries and Galloway and other boards in order, if a realignment is sought, that some of those matters are addressed. And they are addressed to my assurance in terms of quality, safety and waiting times for patients. He's also, of course, quite right that patients can make requests for alternative treatment locations from the current primary pathway at the moment and do that. My understanding is that Dumfries and Galloway is very responsive to those patient requests. I am very happy to ensure that that is more widely understood, but of course the member himself, as a MSP in that area, can contribute significantly to ensuring that constituents understand that that choice is currently available whilst other matters are being looked at.
Question number 5, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is working with drug companies and pharmacies to reduce single-use plastics in the dispensing of medicines.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
Sorry, Presiding Officer. The licensing and safety of medicines is a reserved matter for the UK Government. In addition, regulations which cover medicines packaging are set out in European and UK law, provided the packaging type used ensures the ongoing safety and quality of the medicine. The UK Medicines Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency cannot refuse to authorise the packaging.
Maureen Watt.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but does she agree with me that in relation to asthma inhalers, for example, that this could move at a much faster pace than at present, and only the canisters need to be dispensed and the holders can be used several times, reused several times?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do agree that there is a general question that needs to be addressed, perhaps at a greater pace than at present. On the specific issue of inhaler devices, they are obviously a precision piece of equipment which will work with canisters from the same manufacturer only. The plastic container needs to be robust enough for several cycles, and we would encourage manufacturers to work with Medicines and Healthcare Products Retail Authority on the licensing of products that would allow the product to be reused. There's a recycling scheme in place for respiratory inhalers. The scheme, called Complete the Cycle, has been introduced by GlaxoSmithKline, and inhalers can be recycled at participating pharmacies.
Thank you. Question number 6, Alexander Burnett.
Presiding Officer, and can I note members to my register of interest on forestry, to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its forestry planting targets.
Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing.
Scottish Forestry provides regular updates on the progress towards the government planting targets. These are publicly available on Scottish Forestry's website. The latest figures, Presiding Officer, show that so far 10,954 hectares of grant-funded planting has been approved for planting in 2019. In addition to that, Forest and Land Scotland are expecting to plant 400 hectares in 2019. The final figures will be published in June this year.
Alexander Burnett.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Now, recent inquiries and purchase requests to tree nurseries by people wishing to carry out planting have been knocked back, citing a shortage of supply, and many are now having to delay their planting plans till 2021. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware of this issue, and what is he doing to ensure that it does not impact on Scotland's planting targets?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I've been aware of this issue for the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, in 2017, we started to take action in order to address this. The situation has been exacerbated by summer drought conditions in 2018, leading to reduced supplies of seedlings from nurseries affected by that drought, coinciding with the big increases in planting in Scotland. We anticipated this issue some years ago, and we have therefore supported 20 applications which have brought forward over £2 million worth of investment projects by nursery businesses. This has resulted roughly at a 25% increase in the production capacity of tree nurseries in Scotland. In addition to that, FLS are developing plans for expanding their in-house nursery capacity. In addition to that, the private sector are being encouraged to consider new investments in tree nurseries. Presiding Officer, Scotland is leading the way in forestry. Last year, we planted 84% of all the new plantations in Britain. We intend to continue to give that lead. to address the economy, but also climate change. And I hope our friends down south are taking notice.
Question number 7, Stuart Stevenson.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to a letter from 27 business groups to MSPs regarding concerns that a proposed amendment to the Non-Domestic Rates Scotland Bill, which would remove ministers' ability to set business rate poundage and automatically end the small business bonus scheme and other benefits.
Cabinet Secretary Derek Mackay.
Well, that assessment is correct. On the 15th of January, the Minister for Public Finance and Digital Economy, Kate Forbes, responded to that letter, confirming the Scottish Government's unequivocal support for the uniform business rate and our concern of the complexity, risks and unpredictability related to this Stage 2 amendment to the bill, which was supported by the Green, Conservative and Labour parties. The Scottish Government will continue to work with members of all parties to deliver a bill which supports growth, improves administration and increases fairness.
Stuart Stevenson.
Has the Cabinet Secretary made sure that the members on opposition benches understand fully the implications of withdrawing powers from his office and from the government generally, particularly in relation to the small business bonus scheme, which has protected high streets across Scotland, which has protected small businesses in my constituency in the North East and across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would like to think that all members are aware of legislation that they're voting for when they're voting for it, and I suppose I am therefore surprised by some members' position on this matter. For example, the Conservatives, as of yesterday, Jackson Carlaw's leadership bid has given us the third current running Tory position on the non-domestic rates bill as it stands. But the reality is, if the amendment as moved by Andy Whiteman is continued through to Stage 3, it would remove the government's ability to set that national unitary poundage and also scrap the reliefs that this government has supported, such as the small business bonus. But actually, unfortunately, Andy Whiteman has managed to find a way to be both anti-business and anti-environment, because there are environmental reliefs that would also be scrapped as a matter of law, and ones that we're about to try and deliver, such as for the deposit return scheme, which I thought those supporting the environment would support as well. So other reliefs, as well as the small business bonus that would be scrapped, would include the renewable energy relief, district heating relief, and, as I say, the reverse vending machines. To support the environment and to support business, I would encourage opposition members to listen to the wise words of Kate Forbes, do the right thing, understand the law, understand what you're voting for, and just as we want a unitary poundage, maybe the party should have a unitary position which would be more supportive of the outcomes that we're all trying to achieve.
Question number 8, Michelle Ballantyne.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the issuing of licences for the shooting to scare and shooting of pestiferous birds.
Minister Marie Goujon.
Scottish Natural Heritage is responsible for determining licence applications under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. Licensing for the shooting to scare and shooting of pestiferous birds can be granted by SNH in order to prevent serious damage at fisheries or inland waters. Applications to solve specific problems are looked at on a case-by-case basis and will only be considered if the applicant can demonstrate that they have explored all other non-lethal anti-predation measures and find them to be either ineffective or impracticable.
Michelle Ballantyne.
I thank the Minister for that answer. As the Minister is probably aware, the challenge for local fisheries and river management boards is that applications for these licences require organised systematic counts of the number of birds on the river. Many of these fishery boards are now drastically underfunded and often rely on volunteers, which stifles the ability of the boards to conduct the required counts. So I'd ask the Minister if the Scottish Government will work with Scottish National Heritage to support the smaller fisheries and river management boards by developing limited licences that are less resource intensive to obtain.
Minister.
I would be happy to discuss that matter further with the member. I know that this is an issue that she takes a keen interest in, having sponsored an event a couple of weeks ago where the discussion took place around what we're doing to conserve wild salmon, because that is vitally important and it is absolutely a priority for this government. Now, I know that when it came to licences in general, I think there had been discussion around whether that could be included as part of general licences, and SNH had undertaken a review of that and decided not to include that as part of a general licence. But again, I'd be happy to consider these items further and correspond with the member on these matters.
Thank you very much. And that concludes general questions. Now, before we turn to First Minister's questions, I'm sure members would like to join me in welcoming to our gallery Monsieur François Paradis, the President of the National Assembly of Quebec.